This isn't anything that I haven't shown before, but trying to put a video out at least one a week. Getting to the point where pretty much sanding and gluing is most of what I'll be doing, probably. So today, I spent about 3 hours on the middle ring here. The skirt isn't attached, it would go on the bottom. This is the first ring that I already had some primer on, and then I've sanded the primer. Still needs another coat of primer and a final sanding, which I might just wait until I get all three rings in the same place as this one, where it's pretty much a good portion done. And then this one I had put the Bondo Glazing Putty on, and then this is ring 3, which I haven't done anything with. It's still got some overhangs that I haven't sanded off or anything. I did enlarge some of the holes on layer 3 that go into pegs that are on layer 2. Each layer has pegs. So layer 1 has pegs that layer 2 has holes that fit over, and then at the top it has pegs that ring 3 fits over. And at the top there's a top ring which I've printed but haven't glued together that goes around the entire thing. So like I said, I've shown this much printed before. And what I did was, it starts out like this, and then what I try and do is where you see layers that stick out further than other layers, it's just a printing artifact. I try to sand those down so that they're more uniform like the rest of it, and obviously sand down the bits at the bottom where it sticks to the bed. And I had a brim, and I might have a bit of elephant's foot where the first layer gets pressed a bit into the bed so it kind of curves outwards. Sand that off, and then I covered it all with Bondo Glazing Putty, and then prime it. Some people do the priming before the glazing putty, but I've said before, I'm going to do the glazing putty, at least I'm doing one layer of glazing putty first so I can get all the really low areas up, so that maybe it'll take less coats of primer in the end. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. Some people do it the other way, so I don't think I'll be hurting anything, but I just decided that that's the way I'm going to do it. So what I did today, this was all covered with the Bondo Glazing Putty. I use a plastic spreading tool, and I spread it on all of the visible parts, and in the insets here, anything that's inset panel lines, I try to keep it out of the panel lines. These are actual, indented lines made to look like that's a panel that would open. It does not, but it has those indentations just to give that kind of a 3D effect where it looks like it's, several parts put together. And then obviously you have things panels that do open, like this big door here, there's a door here, and they also have a inset, so when the door is put on, it'll be flush with the body. So after I put that Bondo Glazing Putty on, it's on not super thick, but I just I kind of trowel it on, trying to get it so that it's uniformly covered. And then after it dries, I take 220 grit sandpaper and I sand it down to where I can start to see the plastic coming through. So where you see the Bondo are the lower parts of the print, opposite of this example here, where this one layer line here is sticking out. If you see something dark like this, it's an area where that layer line was inset a bit. And any areas that you can see white are sticking out. So, for example, it's just printing artifacts like this. There's an area here that's whiter. If you go over here, you can see there's some areas of white and some areas of dark. It's just all the vibrations of the printer printing the different parts. The print hot end stopping and moving somewhere else. Just all kind of makes vibrations and different things you can see, like here where this straight line is, where the printer stops printing there's like they call it ringing, almost like print echoes with vertical lines. So they really stand out on the white filament here once you get the glazing putty on it, and you can see that all that stuff needs to be, through a combination of the filler and primer, needs to be eventually smooth. Kind of like the gray primered area here is really pretty smooth. Now areas like this isn't, because there's going to be a greeble, a part that goes in there that covers that area up. So all you're going to see is this bottom inset here, and then it's going to be the piece that gets bolted in there. So there's no point in sanding this smooth, because you're not going to see it. It's going to be covered up. So what I did 3 hours after I had sanded it, if you're sanding, obviously you're sanding up and down, you're not going to be able to get in these panel lines. You can't get your sandpaper in there unless you fold it in half, and that's a pain in the neck. So I tried to stay, keep it out of the panel lines, the glazing putty. You have to pretty much get it in insets like this to get it in the corners, because in the end you'd like to get this all smooth and not have rough edges inside the inset that have this banding of recessed and raised areas, just due to the printer. So what I used was this. This actually comes from a fairly inexpensive kit for soldering. And this tool has a sharp point on one end and like a chisel tip on the other. So I took, again, this isn't glued together. This ring is glued together. This ring is not. And the top one is not. There are 4 bolts on the Mark III design that go through all of the rings, and then you eventually put a nut here and a nut on the bottom when you go to glue them together, and that keeps everything compressed. That adds some structural stability to the entire unit. So what I did was I took the individual pieces here, of which there's 2 here, and then there's a 3rd one here. Back is a 4th, 5th one here. I guess you could count the vent piece that fits in here if you wanted to, but each of the pieces I took and I used a combination of both ends of this. Just kind of held it over a garbage can in my room with my soldering station and my 3D printers while I listened to some Star Wars YouTube videos, some Mark Hamill interviews, and there was a Empire Strikes Back documentary that was pretty interesting that I had on YouTube while I was doing this. and just did my best to clean the excess glazing putty out of the seams. Went around the edges of all the inserts. The back panel has a lot of inserts like this, and I had sanded as good as I could, but in the very corners and the edges there was still a buildup of putty, which if you leave that there, it's not going to be such a crisp inset. It's going to kind of slope in. So tried to get as much as I could out of the very inside lines of the inserts, and then the panel lines. These coin slot inserts, the bottoms that are white, they're all nice and straight across, but the tops are a bit rough, so I had put some glazing putty up in there, so I used a fingernail file for that and went back and forth until it got fairly straight. You won't really see that once the inserts are in place, but I just wanted to get them as flat across as I could. And believe it or not, that took about 3 hours to get all of those pieces just to go with the tool and go through every line, including, that includes lines like this, all the way up here, down there, down there, down there. Anything that had glazing putty built up, I knocked it back down so it's the same level with the plastic that didn't have any glazing putty on it. So when I go to prime it, there won't be little bumps everywhere that had glazing putty sticking out where it shouldn't be, in the panel lines or in these parts here. There's probably going to be some that I missed, but the vast majority of it has been cleaned out. So I then took it out here to put together. I hadn't put them together like this since, well, I'd have to go back and check my last video. I can't remember when I did it last. A couple things that didn't fit very well in the last video. This one right here. And when I push it down, it does fit. There was a bit of a gap there because, again, there's a peg in this ring piece and there's a hole in this one. And the hole was a little bit too small because I hadn't done any work on this ring. So I made that hole a bit bigger, so now it fits down on top of it, and did the same on the other side because it was the same way. Made these pegs and holes here, made the holes bigger in this centerpiece that holds utility arms, so it's nice and flush. I did a little bit on the back panel. I don't know if I can get the camera in there enough to show. It still needs a bit more work. There's still a bit of a gap in there, but it's looking like seem to be doing okay on getting things level. That's my biggest worry, is you're dealing with 3 different rings and gluing them all together and having them all come out level is going to be tough. Obviously I've got things like that, chip from taking out the support material that this piece prints with, and the bottom is in fairly nice, but I'll be sanding that. And then this piece up on the top is a bit rough, that I'll get sanded. So yeah, I got a ton of work sanding ring 3. To do. And the next thing for ring 2 would be priming, but again, it's December in the Pacific Northwest. It's like raining and 100% humidity yesterday. So I don't know when I'll be able to do some painting. I might be able to do the glazing putty on these pieces. Be able to sand these when it's not raining outside, or in this room. I've thought about maybe putting a cardboard box top down here so I can sand and file out here, so I'm not outside in the low 40s or whatever the temperature is out there. Plus I'll have a constant source of light. One of the things that I was finding an issue is taking pieces outside to sand, and as the sun's going across the horizon, I'm trying to find, the raised areas to sand down and see how smooth things are. And I'm wandering all over the yard because the light that was in one area, I hold it apart a certain way and I can see the lines. And then as the light moves, all of a sudden I notice I'm spinning the part around and I can't really see where the raised areas are. And I notice that I'm in shadow, so I take a few steps to where the sun is, and then I can see the areas again. So if I was doing it in here, at least I'd have a constant overhead source of light, which might help with the visual end of seeing what I'm sanding. I didn't want a bunch of sanded plastic flying around in the house, but if I have like a big cardboard box, or even, I guess, even one of these, if I sand it over one of these tubs, I can just vacuum the plastic out. Those parts over there aren't in there because they don't have any alignment holes, and they don't have anywhere that one of those metal rods goes through. So if I put those over there, I'd have to tape them in place, otherwise they'll just fall over because they're just sit on the piece below. There's another good example there of what I'm talking about, panel insert. So it's an insert area that's made to look like it's a door. It's not. It's just made to look like it. So just trying to keep those lines clear of putty. So the next thing I'm probably going to do out here is take the metal rods out, take rings 3 and 1 out, and put ring 2 on this flat piece of MDF and see how it looks as far as gluing it together, because I'm still not sure the best way to glue this together. If it's to glue it on, because it's got holes and pegs, so that would help me if I at least don't glue this ring to this ring, but just put the glue, for example, here, that glues this piece and this piece together. Now that I know that they're on their pegs and their holes and they're lined up, glue those two pieces together, that I know that they're lined up with the section below, and then still I'd be priming that, and then maybe do this piece and the piece next to it, maybe glue, well, no, because this is all one piece from here all the way over to here. And the back panel is tricky because this, you can see this panel has the rods going through. The back panel does not. You can see this is the line for this back panel. So that back panel, which is not removable in the version I've printed here, the Mark III cut file version, does not have a removable back door. Currently, the Mark III that's made for the printers with a 500 by 500 print bed There is now a version with a removable back door, but it has not been cut into a version that you can print on smaller printers like this. This one's made to print on a 300 by 300 printer. And I'm not going to redo it if someone eventually makes those fit on a 300 by 300 printer. I think I'll be fine not having a rear access door to the electronics, since I don't think I'll be messing around with the electronics that much. Just means you have to take the dome off to access the electronics that'll be inside. So that kind of makes lining up the back panel a bit difficult, because if you can see, it's just got an angled piece that fits against this piece's angled edge. And so there's nothing really, I mean, it's got two pegs down there. This support piece here, triangular looking support piece, has a peg in it, and this one over here does too. And so the back panel has there and there holes that line up with those pegs, but that still leaves you a lot of room, wiggle room to move that around. So I'm not sure, again, what the best way is to glue this second ring together. Glue the second ring together by itself on the piece of wood and hope that it comes out round enough that it then sits where it's supposed to when you just drop it onto ring 1, or to put it on ring 1 like this and just put glue here, because that's where these two pieces glue together, is this seam. There's no upper seam. When this comes off, these two pieces are just freestanding. There's nothing that connects them together. This piece connects them together. So you just glue, should I just glue it here? And then I know that it'll be fitting on, the pegs will be fitting on the holes properly. And then just follow around and do the same thing. Next, these two pieces, make sure they're lined up and glue them together. And then do I go to the back panel and line it up and glue it on one side, and then glue this side, and then finally glue this piece in, or save the back panel for last. So I've got the front two pieces. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out the best way to do that and have everything line up. It's one of my bigger worries, is having this thing not line up and how to do it. The file was originally, again, made to be printed on a 500 by 500 millimeter print bed, so you print ring 1 is all one print, and ring 2 is one print, and ring 3 is one print. So when you're done printing, you end up with 3 rings, whereas this is the cut version. So this ring is 4 pieces glued together. This one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces glued together, and the top is 6. Yeah, and the top ring is 6 pieces glued together. So trying to get all of those glued together and round and lined up is kind of a head scratcher, but hopefully it'll all work out fine. So yeah, that's where I am. Just finished cleaning up these lines and ready to start either figuring out how to glue this ring together or partially glue it. If I glue it all together, then I'm going to have to spray paint it by going around it in circles, or making a Lazy Susan setup that I can bin R2 around and spray paint from one position. And then I have all the cleanup to do on ring 3, and then I've got like 100 other pieces that need to be sanded and cleaned up and primed as well. So I might at some point stop working on the body and go to work on some of the greebles that go into all these openings around the body. But that's what I did this week. About 3 hours working on cleaning up ring 2 and did a little work on ring 3, clearing some holes out to get them to sit where they should and kind of assess where I am level wise, which, I mean, pretty good. Things aren't seeming too far out of alignment as far as that and that's concerned. Those are really good. But again, this back panel needs to be down a bit because I haven't opened the holes in the bottom up quite wide enough, and then it's hard to judge these side pieces because they just sit in place to tell where I'm at on the third ring, but concentrating now on the second ring. So I guess that's about all I have.